we're talking in the context of like multiple world religions, then what happens to people that believe in like the same moral code as Christianity? Like, say Hinduism, they have the same moral code of consciousness and do good in the world, but they don't believe in the same God. Are they punished in the same way as non-believers? Or like, what happens to them, and what are the consequences of different religions, who's right and who's wrong?
Two students corner Cliff with questions that most people are afraid to ask out loud. If Jesus is the only way, what happens to billions of people who never heard his name? Harry steps forward first, calm but direct, challenging the very foundation of exclusive religious truth. Then Gabriel pushes deeper. What about Hinduism? What about Islam? What if they all point to the same God? Cliff doesn't dodge. He walks straight into the contradiction. Jesus and Muhammad cannot both be right. One claims to be God, the other says he is not. Both cannot be true at the same time. The evidence, Cliff insists, must decide. But here's the question nobody in that crowd expected him to answer, and the answer will surprise you.
Hi, my name's Cliff. What's your name?
Gabriel.
Harry?
Gabriel.
Tom.
Gabriel.
Something.
Okay, good. You're right. Okay, not only am I being rude to you, Gabriel, I'm being incredibly arrogant. I think I know your name better than you do. What a joke, right? What a total farce. The only way I'm going to have the privilege of getting to know Gabriel is if Gabriel opens up and tells me the truth. If you're silent, or if you play games with my head, I'm never going to have the privilege of knowing Gabriel. If that's true between Gabriel and Cliff, how much more that is true between God and Cliff? I'm not smart enough to figure out Gabriel, and I'm definitely not smart enough to figure out God. I depend on Gabriel to open up and tell me the truth about Gabriel. I depend upon God to open up and tell me the truth about who on earth or in heaven is God. That's where Jesus, Muhammad, the avatars, Shirley MacLaine come into the picture. They all claim to be revealing God accurately. The problem is they contradict each other. It's as if you said, my name's Gabriel, and the next sentence you says, I'm really Tom. You're contradicting yourself. So the question is, are Jesus, Muhammad, the avatars, Siddhartha Gautama, all wrong, or is one of them right? Because they contradict each other, they can't all be right. That's where evidence kicks in. You got to read the teachings of Buddha. You got to read the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, and figure out Hinduism. You got to read the Quran and find out about Muhammad. And I'm standing here saying, please read the New Testament Gospels and figure out, does the evidence point to Jesus Christ being reliable, or does it not? Does that make any sense?
That other texts aren't as reliable, like they don't have as much evidence or as much proof or as much validity behind them as the Bible? Is that what you're trying to get to?
No, very good. Very good question. No, sir. I think the evidence is the Quran, teachings of Siddhartha Gautama Buddha, the Vedas and Upanishads are all very accurate. Now read them. Because the question is Muhammad reliable or is Jesus reliable? And although they agree on many points, they contradict each other on other points. So they both can't be true.
So do you just pick one and hope it's right?
No, you gotta study. I'm sorry, I can't do this homework for you. You gotta study.
You're saying there's some points that are, I guess, accepted amongst like all disciples or whatever they were, the teachers. But then you're saying there's some that contradict.
Yes.
So are you saying, okay, would those contradictions be a different interpretation of what the God is supposed to be relaying through them? Or do you think that's like a personal bias in the sense of their personal interpretation of what it's supposed to be and the way they relay it kind of?
Great question. All right, we'll put it right out in front. In the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Jesus claims to be more than a man. He claims to be God in human form. In the Quran, Muhammad repeatedly says, Jesus is not God. So who is he? Is Jesus God in human form, or is he just a good prophet the way the Quran teaches? That's a contradiction. Are we all agree on that?
Is that a contradiction?
Jesus is not God. Jesus is God. That's a contradiction. They both can't be right. Either Jesus is not God or he is God. Second point, which gets to your question, which was excellent. Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, and cultural Christianity in the wonderful nation of Texas. All of these teach, do good, and then God owes you. Do good, pile up good karma, and you'll get a better next reincarnation. Be a good old boy. Be a nice lady. And then God owes you. Jesus Christ contradicts all of that. Jesus says, I bled and died on a cross to give you forgiveness, grace, the gift of eternal life, which contradicts the idea you do a bunch of good, and then God owes you heaven, nirvana, whatever. See, so that's a fundamental contradiction.
So if you've never been exposed to, if you live in a remote part of the world, you've never been exposed to Christianity, the teachings of the gospel, then how do you get to heaven?
Good question. I do not know. Why? Because Jesus never specifically answered the question, so I can't make an answer up. But he makes 5 points that apply to your excellent question. First point, God's character is just, which means nobody's getting ripped off. God is just. Second point, nobody goes to hell because of ignorance. Nobody goes to hell because they're born in a part of the world where they never heard about Jesus. The only reason people go to hell is because they choose to live their life separate from God. And God grants their request and they'll spend eternity separate from him because they chose to live their life separate from him. Thirdly, there are going to be a boatload of people in heaven who never heard about Jesus. Hebrews chapter 11 in the New Testament lists some of these people. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Rahab, a Gentile prostitute, obviously never heard about Jesus. They were born hundreds of years before him. But in humility, they put their faith in God. God, I don't know how you're going to do it, but I'm trusting you. Fourth point, the only reason those people are going to be in heaven is because Jesus bled and died on a cross for their sin. Nobody's going to be in heaven, according to Christ, because they did enough good, so God owes them. Remember, that's a contradiction between Jesus and every major world religion. Fifthly and finally, although I do not know how God will judge those who never heard about Christ, I do know that all of us here have more than ample opportunity to read the Gospels. We are responsible for what we do with Jesus.
I'm so a little confused on the contradiction of between the religions, I guess. It seems to me like it's very centered around Jesus Christ, I guess. Anything that kind of goes against him, you've kind of been labeling as something that can't coincide with Catholicism or Christianity just because of him. Even like, what if other more than 2 or 3 religions have the same belief, I guess, but that one belief goes against that belief in Jesus and Christianity and Catholicism, even though it's only one religion standing against it? It seems to me you just kind of put that at the center of it rather than kind of give it all an equal chance, I guess, in the form of the contradictions that you were explaining.
Okay, good. Okay, I think you're asking a very deep question epistemologically in terms of how do you know something? All right? Does my imagination define truth? No, good. Okay, because there are a lot of people in this culture who say, yes, it does. You will often hear the statement, perception defines reality.
Thomas theorem in a sense, yeah.
Yeah, that's baloney, right? My perception is you're not standing here. My perception is wrong. Because in reality, you are standing here.
But your perception is that I am standing.
Right. So the question is there enough evidence to support that my eyesight tells me the truth about reality, or is there not enough evidence to support my eyesight telling me the truth about reality? And I would argue there's more than enough evidence that my eyesight helps me pick up on reality than that my eyesight lies to me. That's why I trust my eyesight the way I do. So you see, I am convinced that reality exists separate from my imagination, from my perception, from my belief. Back to my first illustration to you. And please don't forget that one. If I believe that you're Tom, it doesn't make me right. In reality, you are Gabriel. You're not Tom. And if I go around calling you Tom, I'm probably rude, arrogant, but I also just might be totally out of touch with reality, smoking something you don't want to smoke. Okay? So, the same thing is true with God. If it's true with Gabriel, I can promise you it's true with God. If God is real, then God is a certain way. Unless God is impersonal. If God is impersonal, then it really doesn't matter what I believe about God. God's just an impersonal it. But if God actually loves you, then it does matter what you think about God. Because if God loves you, it means he's personal. He's not a fantasy. There's a he that actually cares about Gabriel. Now, if that's true, then Gabriel's got to figure out, how am I going to respond to this personal being, God, who actually claims he loves me and wants me to go to heaven and spend eternity with him? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess that like is a valid answer to our question. And then we had our second question, kind of again, I guess another like question of validity would be, I guess you want to.
Yeah, it's not meant to be silly or anything, but like, in the sense of other life forms, I guess,
Yeah.
My question was, did God only create this one Earth with this one like sphere of life, and only this is it, or like is there a belief that in the universe, there's different worlds with different life forms and also intelligent life elsewhere with the same conscience that has to apply the same moral code, that has to apply the same kind of rules that religion governs, or is this kind of like the only thing there is?
Okay, good. I do not know from the Bible if God has created other intelligent life forms. So once again, I'd be lying to you if I said, well, according to Christ in the Bible, yes or no. Doesn't say. So therefore, I turn to science to ask, what's the evidence that there's other intelligent life in this universe? And to date, I have no evidence there is, but if there's a discovery tomorrow, I'll celebrate that discovery.
So you're saying that like the rules set out that govern Christianity would apply to a new life form on any planet in any galaxy?
I don't know, because Jesus in the Bible never addressed the question. So I can't honestly tell you.
In your opinion, would it strengthen or weaken the argument of religion if there were other life forms found on other planets, stuff like that? Not just necessarily like life form, like very simple, but maybe a higher intelligent like life being, Would that, in your opinion, strengthen or weaken the argument around religion?
Fascinating question. I do not know. I mean, it is, you start talking about extraterrestrial life, and because I have so little evidence, I don't know how to think that one through, to be honest with you.
So that would be a dilemma. Like, if there was life found on another planet, that would be a dilemma for the church to figure out.
And not necessarily just like finding it, but maybe like if they were to be studied, you notice that they don't necessarily follow the code of morals that we do, or necessarily even the same customs. So it's a very big disparity between the way we live life and the way that would live life, So would that still kind of create the ubiquity that religion is supposed to encompass all of the universe and all of life, or would it weaken that argument that God is kind of like all powerful and surrounds all life and all creation, when two separate beings follow so like different codes of life?
Okay, in one sense, I think it would be fascinating to think that one through. Okay, but in another sense, at this point today, I feel it's totally irrelevant to your life, to my life today. See, for me, I think that would be an example of playing intellectual gymnastics.
Right. I get that it's very like a big hypothetical,
Right.
No big basis to kind of like start jumping to that conclusion.
Right.
But at the same sense, it's kind of based on that faith belief that you were talking about earlier, of like the faith of like believing there might be something of the same type of order thinking that we have. In the same way that you have faith in the belief that way back then there was a resurrection of somebody of the same higher order thinking that we had, somebody mortal, but in the sense he was also partly God, right? So he was himself immortal in that sense.
Okay. I am convinced that there is an eternal being, God. I'm convinced that there's only one. So yes, if I discovered other life on other planets, I would be interested in understanding their awareness of God's existence as the creator.
Okay. I get what you're saying. So I guess it comes down to, it's just too hypothetical of an answer, but then it comes down to opinion of like how you would handle that hypothetically. So I guess we'll move on to the third one. Okay. So our third question was kind of like a logic one that I had grown up with and it never really made sense to me, but we were talking about the Virgin Mary and like how do Christians answer when people say like is the Virgin Mary completely valid because she was claiming to be a virgin and like God had sent Jesus to her, but could she have been lying about that? So, like, does that interrupt the validity of her claim that she had the Son of God?
Okay, good question. Obviously, Mary could have been lying. Obviously, she could have had sex with somebody else and had a baby. That's possible. The reason that I am convinced that she was a virgin is because that is what Jesus held to. It's what those who knew Christ, the eyewitnesses, held to. And the evidence is that Jesus was really in touch with reality. What's the evidence? Bottom line, it's real simple. Gabriel, if you die and rise from the dead, I promise to listen very carefully to absolutely everything you have to say. If you die and rise from the dead, the overwhelming evidence is you got a handle on reality like nobody else. So if you tell me you were born of a virgin after you rise from the dead, I'll trust that.
Do you think it's a little too illogical maybe to follow maybe a big phenomenon that has never occurred or been observed, especially like back way in those times where maybe there wasn't so much study about kind of like the function of life and the way it works? And do you think it was a little misleading to follow that one big phenomenon and whatever stemmed out of that to just believe what it like said to be just because of the I guess the circumstances of the extreme happening?
You bet. Okay, if atheism is true, there is no God, then obviously a virgin birth is stupidity. But you see, what an atheist is doing is they're limiting reality. They're saying all of reality is matter and energy, and therefore there is no supernatural hand that can extend out and change a law of nature and perform what you and I call a miracle. I instead, as a theist, say, no, the evidence is there is God. Therefore, what's a miracle? A miracle is the Creator who put together the natural laws, reaching in, changing what you and I know to be a natural law, and performing what you and I call a miracle.